Hello, this is actually a very important video. If you're at all interested in the GFX system, this is a very important video. I ask you to watch this and I never say that. First off, let me start by saying that I've had a lot of people ask me about the autofocus on the new GFX100, and I couldn't make any statements about that until I had the firmware for the lenses to communicate with the camera, which I now do have. By the way, if I ever make an incredibly bold, huge statement about a camera, I take that very seriously, because if I get it wrong, that is the one thing people will always beat me over the head about. Remember when you made that really bold statement? It's like, yeah, I do. And I mean this emphatically, no fanboy talk. Dead serious. I was not able, even though the camera is obviously so much faster than the two current GFX cameras, I was not, and I was told by the bigwigs at Fujifilm that I would not be able to get the full effect of the autofocus capabilities, even though this is a pre-production camera, until I had the firmware updated for the lenses. The lenses actually need new firmware to communicate for phase detect autofocus with the GFX100. So all this time, and even though I've been shooting 5 hours today and 4 hours yesterday, I've been using it while faster in contrast detect autofocus with the current existing lens firmware. I had the firmware sent to me, but it was completely unnumbered, so I didn't know which firmware went to which lens. I have all 8 GFX lenses. I've since updated, and I chose this specifically, the middle range lens as far as speed. And since I've used and I own all 8 GFX lenses, I know the speed of all lenses. The fastest is the 250, the next fastest is the 110. The next fastest after that, really about the same, is the 100 to 200. Right in the middle there is the 32 to 64 zoom. Right underneath that is the 120 millimeter macro. And underneath that, both of them together, the 45 and the 23 millimeter. And right at the very bottom is the 63 millimeter. So I installed the firmware update for talking with the camera for phase detect autofocus on the 32 to 64, which is what I have on the camera right now. So now this lens communicates. I also installed new firmware, new pre-production firmware for the GFX100. So now this lens has full communication for phase detect autofocus with the camera. And I'm going to make a bold statement right now, and I'm dead serious about it. And this is a perfect lens for that, since it's right in the middle as far as speed on the GFX lenses, right in the middle. This camera is now a revolutionary camera. Oh, fanboy talk, no, I am serious. What is the speed of the camera? People say, well, is it at least as slow as the Nikon D4? Oh, no, it's much faster than the Nikon D4 with, say, a fast AFS, like an 85 millimeter 1.8, for example. What is this comparable to give you with the 32 to 64? Knowing that this is a mid-range speed lens and the 8 current lenses of the GFX system. I thought about this long before making this video, and it sits right at the edge of the final hours, meaning final days, or the last firmware thereof, of the Fujifilm X-T2 with the 18 to 55. In other words, all those countless firmware updates that sped up the Fujifilm X-T2, this camera is smoking fast. This is the world's first smoking fast, which of course is not a technical description. Why is it that I think it might be the fact that the people that have been using this camera until now, other than some Fujifilm insiders, were using existing GFX lenses with their existing firmware with this camera, which, while faster, was not the full capabilities of the camera. And even this is not full capabilities as far as I know, because it's a pre-production unit. Today, I updated the firmware for this camera body, okay? And then I updated the firmware for this specific lens. I chose this lens. This is amazing. This makes this a revolutionary camera. Importantly, too, as I've already said and tested thoroughly, I've done some indoor, and it's going to be a huge boon for wedding ceremony photographers who cannot do flash photography indoors. Of course, medium format Doesn't matter if it was film or digital. Doesn't matter if it was Fujifilm, Mamiya, Hasselblad. Suffered bad camera shake. In other words, if you were shooting at 1/125th of a second, I've got better handholding capabilities than most people. If you were right about 1/125th, roughly about, you had some serious issues worried about shutter shake. I've done countless handheld shots, even one handheld with this camera, at 1/10 of a second and slower. Most of them are at 1/10, 1/15th of a second. 99% success rate, no exaggeration. Absolutely unbelievable. For event photography and indoor wedding ceremony, the fact that I don't need a monopod with this camera, where I can do like wedding, which don't do weddings anymore, but I mean, for so far as wedding photographers, that's a huge boon. This camera, and mark my words, I mean, those are huge, bold statements that I'm about to repeat. This camera is as fast with this lens, with the updated firmware for communication for phase detect autofocus, as the last days of the Fujifilm X-T2 with, like I said, you know, like an 18-55 or, which is about middle of the range on the X series lens, and I have all the X series lenses, and I have all the GFX series lenses, so that's right about mid-range as far as autofocus speed. I mean, it's not blasting fast like the 80mm macro or the 90mm or the 50-140. It's right in the middle there. So the last days of the X-T2. So imagine the last days, meaning the last firmware days of the X-T2. So imagine this camera with the last days of the X-T2 autofocus speed. Also, too, with 5.5 stops of IBIS, which I said would be a huge boon for medium format that suffers shutter shake. All of them do. You know, then you could do handheld shots in ambient, low-light, crappy lighting at 1/10 of a second with really, really high success rate. That does make this definitionally a revolutionary camera. Not fanboy talk, not Fujifilm, you know, talking head talk. I mean, I'm serious. When I make a bold statement, people will hold my feet to the fire on making a statement that bold. It was roughly about 30% faster for autofocus when I've been out for the past 2 days. I've done a lot of shooting. You can see my face is sunburned a little bit from so much shooting that I've done with this camera. And, you know, 30% faster was good. You know, it's about what I was waiting to make a statement, and this is still a pre-production camera, but I was waiting to make a statement about autofocus speed with this camera. And now I actually can, and now that I've updated the firmware on this lens. And that's I was told specifically, you know, for phase detect autofocus communication with the camera, you need new firmware for all the lenses. I have firmware updates for all the lenses that were sent to me. I didn't install them until now because I literally did not know which file went to which lens. Now I know. That's amazing. That definitionally does make this a revolutionary camera. It does. Medium format has never gone there before. It's not. And this does. I mean that. It's not fanboy talk. I'm dead serious. So, a lot of people ask me that question, and that's the answer. And it's huge. That is a huge statement. Nobody else mentioned this. Like I said, I think it's because they were not using updated lens firmware. I think one person did a recent video. Someone was like, oh my God, I'm doing action with like a skateboarder. I think he was using an updated firmware lens where the lens and the camera went together from Fujifilm. So there's one YouTuber that I know that was using updated firmware. So that's amazing. Thanks for watching. Bye.